Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Healthy Relationships Initiative Relationship Booster. We're glad to have you with us today. The mission of the Healthy Relationships Initiative is to promote happy, healthy, and safe relationships in Guilford County and beyond. And we invite you to check out our website at www.guilfordhri.org for more information and resources, as well as connect with us on social media at Guilford HRI. If you're joining us for the live program today, you have the opportunity to ask questions through the chat room, and we really encourage you to do so at any time. And the best way to do that is to send a message to the moderator, Camilla Dos Santos. And we welcome your feedback on this program. And so before signing off, Camilla will share the link to a feedback survey, and we welcome your input to help us continue to improve these programs. Our topic for today's Relationship Booster is healthy relationships in older adulthood. My name is Christine Murray, and I'm the director of the Healthy Relationships Initiative, and I'm also a professor in the Couple and Family Counseling track at UNC Greensboro. And our guest expert today is Evelyn Smith, and she is with the Piedmont Triad Regional Council Area Agency on Aging. Your agency has a very long name.
It does.
I've got just for today. And so she's here to share some of her insights with us. So Evelyn, could you tell us a little bit about your work and especially why this topic of healthy relationships in older adulthood is something that's of interest to you?
Sure. At the Area Agency on Aging, I'm involved with the Older Americans Act, and that provides for seniors to be able to stay in their communities and live with the choices that they would like rather than being prematurely placed in institutional care. And that's a very important role, and I enjoy doing that. I came to that in an unusual route. I actually started my career as a psychologist and did that for many years, working with children and adults. I went into administration with that, and then began doing some teaching part-time at the community college and found that that was something important to me too. And so my next career was in education, and I worked as a academic department chair and division chair, and then was able to retire and do some things on my bucket list and then come back for an encore career with the Area Agency on Aging.
Wow, what an exciting career you've had, especially just thinking about how you've really worked with people across the whole lifespan, yes, which I think is really important for thinking about, I'm sure, how you think about this topic of aging and what that looks like, because, of course, what happens in aging is connected to people, their experiences earlier in life, too.
Absolutely. It's important to think about the whole lifespan and how at each stage there's value in what people are able to offer and to bring to us. And as people age, those experiences from their past, those are important in terms of shaping them. So all phases of the lifespan are important, and I feel fortunate to have been able to work with folks at different stages along that lifespan.
And I'm sure, based on the work that you're doing right now in terms of keeping people in their communities, if that's what they wish to do rather than going into some sort of institution, that it seems like there are always a lot of relational issues and family issues that come up with those decisions. So I'm sure that's something that you see too.
Yes, there absolutely are. And, you know, the topic of healthy relationships is important at all of those stages. Adults who are in dating relationships or in relationship with their children, there are certain, I guess, pieces of that they have to learn how to navigate. And that's not always easy, and so hopefully we'll get into some of the details of those that are important.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about a lot of those topics, so I look forward to hearing what you have to say. So to kind of real big picture to start us off, of course, as you said, healthy relationships are important at any stage of life, but why are they especially critical for adults in older adulthood?
Sure. So older adults, and let's just say from 50s to 60s and on up, some folks in their 50s may say I'm not quite an older adult at that time, but certainly by various definitions. So relationships are important in terms of our connection and our well-being. Loneliness, as research has shown, loneliness has as much negative effect on your mortality as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, which means that loneliness is worse on your health than obesity.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that perspective, relationships are important for all of us. As we look at older adults in those relationships, it's very important to think about the connections that they need in order to navigate these different phases of their life. And so as we age, there are things that we have to take into consideration and think about. For example, our peer group begins to disappear as we age. And the older you get, the more folks there are that were your peer group who are no longer there. They've either passed on or they've moved into institutional care, or due to illness, they're not available to you. So then you've got to figure out your network. A lot of older adults, their primary network is their job. And so when they retire, now those connections are also gone. And so it's important to have that network. It helps as far as a part of your identity. It helps in terms of your connection to your history and your past. And it helps you to be a part of this community in a vital way.
And that's such a powerful statistic that you mentioned about loneliness being so bad for people's health. And so what are some of the reasons why loneliness especially has those links with a person's physical health?
Sure, and you know, one of the ways that it's easier to explain is to think about, because most of us can think about, for example, failure to thrive babies. And these are babies who have, they're getting their physical need met for food and diaper changes, but they're not getting that loving touch and someone holding them and nurturing them. And we know that when those babies don't have that, that they don't do well health-wise or emotional-wise. We can also think of an example. Most of us have seen a movie where someone was in prison, a prisoner of war or some situation like that, and they were isolated. And then they started to have cognitive changes from depression to misperceptions about what was going on around them. And so with those factors, it's easy to see. But when we think about perhaps a 70-year-old woman living in her home in a 2,000 square foot house in suburbia, then we don't seem to make that connection that, wait a minute, all those effects on that failure to thrive baby or that person who's in a prison camp, those are the same kinds of consequences that can happen. Your perception of the world can become limited or distorted. Your ability to engage with the world is sometimes compromised. And then there's research that shows that it has effects on your cardiovascular health. It has effects on your immune system. And research is delving into this, and there's more that they're looking at, but they are finding that direct link.
And I think it's really important to point out that loneliness and being alone are related but two separate things to think about. So it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody living on their own is necessarily lonely, because they could be engaged in other ways. And possibly even people living in, let's say, even a nursing home might be around other people, but they could still be experiencing that loneliness.
Right.
But what I really liked about what you were saying is just how we have this basic need for connection and closeness with others, and that doesn't end when we get older. And in fact, though, might be harder to meet that need because some of our natural connections that we've had throughout life in other ways are no longer there, or they've changed.
Very true, yes. I mean, if you think about kids, you know, they go to daycare, they go to school, they're in sports teams, there are kids in the neighborhood. It's sort of really easy for them to just pick up those connections. And then as you look at teenagers, school programs, even adults who are healthy and active, they are participating in the workforce, or they may be participating in the volunteer force. But for older adults who may have some limitations, functional disabilities, may not be able to drive like they used to, then those connections kind of decrease. And the internet has allowed some of that to be mitigated, but there are seniors who don't use the internet, or even live in rural areas where there's not much access, or even folks who can't afford the monthly fee for internet service. And so they've got to find connections other ways. Certainly people watch television, but it's sort of a one-way connection. You aren't really getting interaction from those characters on the television. And then one of the things we've seen is that some seniors are vulnerable to phone scammers because here's this person who's calling you and having a conversation with you and acting interested, and so you may be tempted to have more of a conversation with them and carry on because they're asking you and they're letting you talk about your grandchildren and other things, and their whole goal may be some sort of scam, but you're thinking this person talks to me. There are some people where their only interaction might be the postal delivery person. Fortunately, we have some programs like Meals on Wheels that bring meals to folks, and so those individuals not only bring the meal, but they take time to interact and check on folks. So that's an important service. But for many people, their interactions are really limited. The family doesn't come that often. Their adult children are engaged in various activities, and so that they're alone and lonely. And part of that has to do with access. I could be alone, but is there someone that I could pick up the phone and reach out to and they'd be willing to talk to me? Is there someone that I could call and they would be willing to come by? Can I anticipate that on Sunday my kids are coming over? So it's one thing to be alone, another thing to really not have any access or dependable resource where you know you're going to get to connect with someone on a regular basis.
So it seems like one of the big challenges with with relationships for older adults is just having people to be connected with.
Yes.
And then what would you say are some of the other unique dynamics or experiences that affect relationships? So if people do have people that they're connected to, what might be some of the either unique strengths or challenges that they face?
Sure. So in terms of just the strengths that are there, certainly when seniors are connected with other people, whether it's dating relationships or otherwise, that provides an opportunity and an outlet that, of course, we all need. And when seniors are dating, they tend to be a little more intentional about what they need. And one of the reasons for that is that they can look and see that there's more time behind them than there is ahead of them. And so there's a little more thought sometimes into what do I want out of this relationship, and being able to make decisions fairly efficiently on whether this is something I want to pursue or not. Not that other folks don't do that, but certainly that luxury of time isn't always there for them. So the strength is that decision. I know what I want out of this relationship. I want companionship. Out of this relationship, I'm actually looking for marriage, and so that screening process can be a little bit more efficient.
And I imagine, too, and we'll talk a little bit more about dating, too, but some things you said just about this, that I imagine that on the one hand, kind of what you're saying, that time pressure and just sort of people know what they want and they're ready to make decisions and know if another person fits. But I would think possibly a risk might be for people who are lonely, maybe to be entering into an unhealthy relationship just because they're, just like you said about the potential for being scammed just because somebody's paying attention to them and spending time with them. So that's probably also something for older adults in the dating world to be thinking about.
It is true. There are some vulnerabilities there, and sometimes people, for example, a lot of older adults will use these dating sites, and there are some vulnerabilities there because in the traditional way that you met folks, if you're a senior now, the traditional way was you met them through friends, you met them through family, you met them through your place of worship, and that meant that there was a community of people who could vouch for this person and say, oh, yes, he's a good person to date or she's a good person to date, or they could say, you need to be careful, there's some things in that person's history that you ought to be aware of. So there was a little bit of a vetting process before you got engaged. On the dating sites, you've got a script that says this is what I am and these are my interests, but you really don't have that team of people you trust to vet that person. So there is a vulnerability there, and one of the things that's good advice for whether you're a senior or at any age using these sites is that it's important to drive yourself to these meetings so that you have a way to leave if it's not a comfortable situation. also letting someone know, and this sounds like you're a parent, but truly letting someone know,
Yeah.
I'm going on this date with this person at this place, and I expect to be back by this time. And a newer technique that people can use is to actually, when you meet your date, take a selfie with that person and send it to your friends.
Oh,
That
wow.
way, if anything happens, they can go, wait, this is a description of the person they were with, and hopefully none of that, goes down that terrible road.
Yeah.
But there's some healthy ways to really be
Mhm.
careful and, make sure that people aren't asking you for money and things like that early in the relationship. So that's where having another friend besides only the person you're dating is helpful, because someone can give you some balance and say, well, you seem to really like him, but he's already asking you for money, or she's already asking you for money, so let's talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit.
And
But,
like you said, those are great strategies for people at any age. I
Mhm.
think it does seem like for older adults, especially that vulnerability piece and the loneliness, but especially, as you just mentioned, the dating world and even beyond just dating, what it's like even maybe to make friends or what relationships like in general are very different. And so especially you think about somebody who maybe was married for 40 or 50 years and maybe their spouse passed away, and then it's like this totally different world than what they were when they were last in that dating scene or looking to make new friends if they're moving or something like that. I'm sure that's really overwhelming for a lot of people.
It can be, and it can be really frightening to go from, being married or in a long-term relationship for, some time, and then to say, okay, I'm going to be out and available in this dating world again. And one of the key things people ask is, what are the rules now?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is I'm supposed to say. Can I ask the guy, or does he have to ask me? And so all of those things become a challenge. But one of the things to go by is, if there were things that worked for you when you were dating before, when you were younger, years ago, use those now. For example, if you had a rule that I don't believe in early intimacy or early kissing or any of those things, then you can stick to that. That doesn't go out of style.
Yeah.
If you want to be really careful and meet this person around friends and family first, follow those rules. So a lot of the rules you had before, they really aren't out of style. It's really about your personal choice about how you want to go forward. Some people say, I don't like the way I did it before, I'm going to do something different. But it's really about looking in yourself and what's your comfort. And so that helps people to move forward. But it really is a scary process.
Yeah. And, it's kind of on a related note that I've read that rates of sexually transmitted infections are really high among older adult populations, and that's just something that for a lot of reasons I think a lot of people might be uncomfortable talking about, or they're not thinking about it. Maybe they're not thinking about using any sort of protection because they're not going to get pregnant at that age. But that's an important thing for people to think about as well, those sort of risk factors.
It's very true. The rates of sexually transmitted diseases among older adults are, frighteningly high.
Yeah.
And one of the factors in that is that older adults think, well, I'm older and she's older, so we're not involved with these young people and we're not going to get these diseases. But those diseases are present regardless of your age. And if you don't use precautions, then you are very subject to get these diseases. And then even thinking back to, if a woman is, say, 70 years old now and she's engaged in a sexual relationship with a partner, probably back when she was 19, she didn't say, now I demand that you use a condom.
Yeah.
I mean, so now she's 70 and she's going to make that statement. So sometimes that whole issue of women being able to assert themselves and say, these are the conditions, these are the requirements. If you don't honor these things that are important to me, then I'm not going to engage with you. Sometimes that's not really a part of what they've done before, and so it's really challenging. Other times, people are afraid of losing their relationship. If I set these boundaries or say that these are the conditions, for intimacy, then you might leave me. And then for women, if you've got a woman who's 50 to 54 years old, then there's generally an equal number of men and women. But by the time she gets 60 to 64, then there's going to be 2.3 more women than men.
Wow.
And then if you get to 70 to 74, the ratio is 4 women to 1 man.
Wow.
So in terms of dating, sometimes women are mindful in their older age, well, at any age, but certainly as they get older, they're mindful of, okay, you know, I've got this person, this partner, and now, you know, I better do what I can to keep this person because I might not get somebody else. What are the odds? What are the statistics for that? And so they may tolerate behavior that otherwise might be unacceptable to them or uncomfortable for them just to maintain that relationship.
Just to have somebody there for
Yes.
them. And it sounds like a lot of it goes back to the potential risks of loneliness. And one thing you said, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because I think whether we're talking about a really long-term marriage or other partnership or even just a friendship, that seems like it would be a common experience for people just to have a mate, really significant people in their life that they lose. And what does it look like to process that in a healthy way and then look at what would be a good approach for moving forward and sort of building other relationships, especially if that leaves that sense of grief and maybe loneliness? Yes.
Well, one thing we don't do well in this society is give people the freedom to individually grieve. A lot of times what we want to do is put a time limit on it. Well, you should be over this by now. You should be ready to move on. And that grief is as unique as that person's relationship was to that person. So we need to allow people to take the time that they need to do it in the individual way that they want. You know, I always say that grief sometimes looks like mental illness. You know, you may be talking to the person that's deceased. You may be going to their gravesite and having a conversation. You may be saying that you heard from them, they're talking to you. And so in any other context, someone might say those are symptoms of some sort of mental distress. But in fact, those are common factors of grief. But people look at that and they try to say, okay, you're not doing well, you're not okay, when in fact that's normal. So in that grieving process, allowing enough time and then allowing that person time to sit back and say, well, what do I want now? First, I've got to get comfortable with me alone. You know, me as not the wife, me as not the partner. I've got to figure out who I am now, because my life has been defined in part by this relationship, and the choices I made included that person. Now I'm about to make choices that don't involve considering this person's presence and involvement. So I've got to get through that part first, and sometimes people want to push people into dating before they've done that step, and then they end up being in relationships, and those don't work out well because they haven't finished sort of defining themselves. So allowing that time, and then being supportive when that person is in relationships. A lot of times for older adults, one of the biggest factors that they face or challenges they face is their adult children. You know, wait a minute, Mom, I only see you with Dad, or Dad, I've only seen you with Mom, and I can't imagine that you would be in another relationship. And so the idea that this person may be being unfaithful to the memory of that, you know, form, or even if they're divorced, they're unfaithful because the adult children may still be hoping somehow they'll get back together or they'll work it out. So there's that adjustment. And then sometimes adult children are thinking about their inheritance. Well, wait a minute. If Mom remarries, then this guy might get the house, or his kids might get the house. If Dad remarries, then she's going to get those things that belong to Mom and those things that we wanted. And so sometimes that's a factor that worries the children. And certainly adults, when that situation comes up, they can address it with their kids by saying, it's my life, it's my business, and you don't have any say-so in it. Or if they share that concern about those things, they can work with an elder law attorney to work out what does go to the children and have that kind of discussed with the kids and with the new spouse ahead of time, so everybody knows this is what's going to happen and it's in writing, so let's clear that off the table, and now I can be involved in this relationship.
It seems like it is really important for older adults to be really clear in what they want,
yes,
and be able to communicate that to people, and then for the people around them, whether that's professionals working with them or family members, to honor those choices too, because I don't think there are set rules about how long someone should wait to date after a loss, or even whether they should. I think for some people, it can be just as healthy a choice to say, I want to date, I would love to find somebody else to spend the rest of my years with, or I think that I want to honor that memory of my former spouse, and I don't want to be in another relationship. And one thing that I also am curious to get your thoughts on, as we were planning the Healthy Relationship Initiative several years ago, we did a focus group with some older adults at a local nursing home facility. And I believe most of them were in their 90s. They expressed that they had long-term marriages, very long-term marriages, and still were really affected by that, even though it had been several years. But one of the things that really I still think about a lot, especially in relation to this topic, is that they said that for them, they really didn't want to even get close to a lot of friends. Because they felt like if let's say you and me become friends, but we're both older and one of us is going to go before the other, and then that's just more grief and pain for them. So they kind of had to develop the boundary, I guess, to say that they were okay with maybe having somebody that they would sit with at breakfast and chat with, but they really didn't want to get close with new people because they were afraid that would bring new loss into it.
Yeah, and that's a real difficulty for older adults. I mean, if you think about it, their losses increase as they age. More people that they went to school with are passing on, more people that they work with are passing on, more people that were friends and even siblings are passing on as you age, and particularly by age 90, your circle of people that have been with you through the journey or who share your experiences and share memories about these different events that happened historically, that gets smaller and smaller. So one of the things that can happen with that is certainly to allow some grief support types of resources for seniors, and particularly in institutional care, so that they have a way to process grief and can think about that so that they can have the benefit of some relationships that have more meaning. Certainly they can have some utilitarian functional relationships, but that desire for intimacy may be there, and if their desire is there but they just don't know how to navigate the grief, some support for them is important. And as you speak of nursing homes or institutional care, in nursing homes, people aren't aware of this, but if a couple in a nursing facility want to have a relationship, regulations now require that the nursing home provide them with privacy. So say if there's a 90-year-old and an 89-year-old and they want to be together, nursing homes now must make provision for that, either by putting a sign on the door saying do not disturb and no staff or anyone else is to go in there, or they can provide a room or space for them. But even if they just want to go in there and just talk privately without staff and other folks around them, that is required that they provide that now. So a lot of people aren't aware of it, and you know that comes from a history way back where people were made fun of or ridiculed if they had relationships. And another area with that is caregivers sometimes when they have moved a person into institutional care. They place them in a nursing home, and the person may have some dementia, Alzheimer's, and so they form an attachment to another resident. And then the spouse is saying, wait a minute, I'm going to this facility and they're holding hands with this other person and they don't even recognize me. And so there are some challenges with that. There's some really good resources at the Alzheimer's website, alz.org, that help people with dealing with some of those challenges. But one of the greatest losses is to have a spouse who has memory issues, dementia, and that relationship that you had that defined your marriage has changed, and you have to figure out how to still enjoy that connection with that person not being the same and not being present and not having the memories that you have anymore.
Yeah, and that's a really important example that you shared, and I imagine that that same dynamic plays out maybe in less extreme cases too of just people, when you're aging in relationships, everybody's not going to physically, cognitively age in the same way.
Right,
and so I would think and would be interested in hearing your thoughts on how that can play out in relationships too in older adulthood, where maybe there are other health issues or just changing. I mean, realistically, it's probably almost never the case where two people are aging in exactly the same way.
So true. It's very individual. And if you look at the commercials that talk about relationships for older adults, you know, there are these websites that say you could seniors meet and various types of things, and all the seniors on the commercials look healthy and able-bodied, and they look really well, and that represents a certain segment of the population. But there are many others who are dealing with chronic illness, and the older you are, the more likely you are to be dealing with one or more chronic illnesses. So that doesn't afford the opportunity. I mean, people can go on those websites regardless, but the expectation sometimes can be that the person may say, I'm only going to look for people who look like me or who are healthy like me or whatever. So there aren't many. I mean, I think that's an area where ageism comes in. People discriminate based on age, and so from a social gathering, there's a social gathering for seniors, and it's at 7 p.m. at night, and you have to travel the highway to get there.
Yeah.
And think about the number of seniors who don't drive at night because they're not comfortable. There may be visual changes, or they don't like driving on highways, or they don't like being out at night. So now you just excluded a whole group of people who can't participate in that event. There are social gatherings that are maybe at some building where you have to park in like a parking lot, and then you've got to walk 3 blocks or a block and then go upstairs or catch an elevator that's all the way on the other end of the parking deck. And so a lot of times people don't think about every senior. They think about that senior on the commercial when they're planning events, the one who can drive, the one who's active, the one who can walk a block and go up the parking steps and all of that. And so it leaves out folks who have physical or cognitive challenges who still have needs for relationships. And one of the ways that that can be accommodated is for seniors to start with their network that they have. Is it a son, a daughter, a neighbor, and say, hey, I'd like to get out and do some things. Or are you having some things? Please include me. So that at least they're getting access to people for connection. Even if it's not a dating relationship, there are connections there. If your neighbor says, well, I'm going to have some friends over for cards, I'd love to come. And then you go to that. Now you've met some people. You take some phone numbers. And I like to say for seniors that they need to close the deal, and that's a term I borrow from the business world, but essentially a lot of conversations go like this. Oh, you know, we should get together again. Yeah, we really should. Okay, yeah, I'm going to call you. That's it.
Right.
And it doesn't happen. So closing the deal is the person says, yeah, we should get together again. How about next Tuesday at 4? I've got some time then.
Yeah.
And the person says, well, no, okay, how about Saturday? Saturday at 2 o'clock, could we meet then? And close that deal and get a firm commitment. Or someone says, I'll be back. Why don't we set that up? Let's put it on the calendar. So to really turn those casual statements into a real commitment that's on your calendar, and then you're more likely to get it. Because we don't want to have we say these things all the time. I'm going to call you. We should get together. Let's do this. But it doesn't happen because the deal isn't closed, and now it's waiting on somebody to say something.
Right.
So being real intentional about, no, I want to talk with you. I want to see you again. I want to get with you, and making those things happen from there.
And I think people of any age can feel afraid of rejection or nervous about that sort of thing. So I think for people to just realize that that's normal, that it's normal to feel if you're going out on a limb a little bit, to really try to nail down a date that you might feel that, and remembering that not every relationship is going to turn into a best friend or somebody you're going to really be spending a lot of time with, but
just a value in how many different types of relationships you can have and different people you might have in your life. And so for people to really remember that importance of being proactive. And I think at any age too, people can feel, you can look around and see everybody else has this great group of friends, or everybody else is so well connected, and why isn't anyone reaching out to me? But the reality is that at any age, the people who tend to be the most well connected are the people who initiate those connections and who take that extra step to get involved. And, you know, maybe it's not just going to a group at your place of worship, but leading a group or stepping up. So I think it's probably hard for people maybe in older adulthood, especially if there are maybe physical limitations or health concerns or whatnot that might impact someone's energy, but just to find those places to feel where you can be more proactive and be intentional about building those relationships and stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Sure, yes, and it really is taking the situation into your own hands. There's really not much that you're going to benefit from passively waiting for these things to happen for you. And even, for example, with the asking someone, well, how about let's get together next Tuesday? Keep your goals small. My goal is to spend an hour with this person over coffee. Not to find a soulmate, not to turn into marriage. My goal is to spend an hour with this person over coffee. That's an achievable goal. And that makes it less feel like a rejection if it doesn't turn into anything else. Well, I met my goal. I spent an hour with this person. We had coffee. Great. Would I like for that to turn into something more? Yes, no. But if it doesn't, you know, that's okay. And then as far as, creating something, you can start an online blog. You can start an online group. There's a really interesting one. It's called Elder Orphans. And I don't really like the term elder orphans because it sounds sad. But it's actually a Facebook group for people who are by choice or by circumstances aging alone. And out of that, one of the things they do is form networks, and they talk about building a support network. So say that you're alone and you don't have any family or kids, or maybe you don't want them to be involved in your life at this stage. Developing a network of people to say, okay, this is Joe, and he's in my community, and I'm going to have him be the person that has power of attorney. And this is so-and-so, and she can make really good decisions, so I'm going to do advanced directives, and I'm going to list her as the person who will make decisions because I know that she could carry out when I say I don't want life-saving measures. And so these people on this website or Facebook page are forming communities to have someone to do that. One of the things that research is showing now that a lot of times folks who are LGBT have relationships that are separated from their family. And so when it comes time for, you know, major life decisions, their care, their health, and what's going to happen because I'm sick now and all of that, sometimes those relationships are estranged or strained. And so they are building a network out of the people that are their friends and their chosen family as opposed to their biological family, and working things out together. So there are a number of ways that people can be proactive and say, I'm going to do something about this, and if it's not there, I'll create it. And if I can't create it by myself, I'm going to call my neighborhood community agency or the YMCA and say, I think there ought to be a group for seniors with mobility challenges, and we'd like to get together and have a conversation. Can you help to create that there, or can you point me to someone? And I may not be able to start the group myself, but I'm willing to be a cheerleader. I'm willing to make phone calls. I'm willing to be an encourager. Can we have someone set this up so that we can do it online even, so that there are relationships there? So being proactive is a real important part of making these things happen.
Yeah, and it seems also like just the importance of having realistic expectations and understanding that it takes time to build those relationships. And that's true at any stage of life. But just, I would really like that example that you said about if you're going on a date, it's just to spend an hour with that person. It's not, I'm going to find my soulmate and we're going to live happily ever after for the rest of our lives. Similarly, if you are thinking, well, you know what, I need to get more connected in the community, I would love to build more friendships, you think, let me go to this fitness class at the YMCA. And then you get there and you're like, I'm not sure these are my people. And that's okay. Maybe you can go to an art class at a community college or a computer class at the library or just a lot of different groups. But I know it's hard for people to go out and keep maybe feel like they're putting themselves out there. But just even going back to what we talked about at the very start of this conversation, just needing to remember that it is so important to have some sort of network, some sort of relationships that are feeding your spirit and that are helping you meet those needs for connection. And to keep looking for it, even if it takes some time. But also, I think if we have people who are listening who are maybe professionals who work or family members, how can you then support? So if somebody's getting frustrated, like I tried this class, I tried this thing, I tried this group, nothing was working, how can you maybe help to maybe do some of the legwork to research different organizations or start something new, or if there's a skill like computers, can I sit down with my parent or my grandparent for a few hours and help teach them how to get on Facebook or how to get into some different groups? And so for the older adults themselves to remember the importance of it, but then people around them, how can I support them in making these connections?
Yes, absolutely. And talking with your family is a very important part of that process. One, it lets them know, I have these interests. I want to meet people. I want to get engaged. And secondly, yes, you can have them do that legwork for you. I think that we can get from the person first, what is it you like to do? What do you desire? Sometimes adult children don't even know what mom's interests are because it's been dad and whatever dad liked to do. So helping that person to even discover interest. Have you considered taking a class on that? I'll take it with you and let's see if we like it. So maybe it's a pottery class or maybe it's an art class. The idea of taking them with you or going with them makes a difference in terms of someone making that first step. And sometimes you can frame it as, I'm thinking about taking a pottery class. I don't know if I'm really going to like it, but would you go with me so that I'm not by myself? And then the older adult feels like I'm going to help her. I'm doing it for this purpose instead of they're taking me to this to see if I can get out of my loneliness. And so it makes it more palatable for that person. The other thing is to have that conversation with your kids about, I do want to date, I do want to meet people, I do want to connect. And then sometimes really the dating relationship is what the person thinks is the solution, but when you look at the real problem they're trying to solve, it doesn't have to be a dating relationship. For instance, a person says, well, I don't like going to dinner by myself. Well, you don't have to date somebody to do that. You can join a dinner group. You can meet another person, even of the same sex, who's your age and who has similar interests. So there are ways that can happen. So sometimes people assume dating is the only way. Or I'd like to travel. So I have to have a man to go with me, or man, I have to have a woman to go with me. Well, there are travel groups for seniors, so they can go together, and they're kind of designed to accommodate the different needs of a senior group. They're not, breakneck pace, we got to go through all these places, but more relaxed and accommodating. So there are really a lot of options out there if people will do the research or call their community agencies and say, what's out there for me? And sometimes the solution is not dating, it's just a friend or a companion that doesn't have to be someone with a romantic interest.
And it seems like just keeping a spirit of curiosity and even a sense of adventure, even if there are maybe some physical health challenges or other challenges that people are facing, but I think just in general for people to remember that even in their older adult years that you can have a lot of new experiences that are different. And even kind of think about relationships too. You can have new experiences in relationships or new kinds of relationships. Like you said, the example of maybe a woman who never really knew what her interests were because she just always would go along with what her husband would say. And maybe that can be a real time of discovery for
Sure.
one's own self, or also even just in relationships. Maybe once I think for a lot of older adults, especially maybe looking at marriage or dating, that the older adult years could possibly be the happiest years of their relationship, because you're not dealing with the stress of, and this of course assumes, and we know there are a lot of grandparents who are raising their grandchildren.
Yes, sure.
If you're not raising children in the home, and maybe you have more time on your hands, either you're not working or you're working a more limited schedule, it's just to really keep that positive attitude. That seems like that would go a long way towards fostering healthy relationships.
Absolutely. I mean, in some ways, it's the ideal time for relationships when you're aging, you're a senior, because the key factor is freedom. I'm not involved in getting kids to school or making sure they make it through college. I'm not working, so I've got this free time. I've got perhaps a retirement income, or even if it's a fixed income, but I'm free to go do things that I want to do. So to meet someone in a relationship who also is in that situation, and we can go do things together, you know, there are a lot of things, you know, for example, a trip, you don't have to say, well, it can only be 3 days because I have to be back at work on Monday.
Right.
You can say, we can do a 1-week cruise, and we both don't have to worry about being back at work. We've got some income that we saved, and so it can be a very enjoyable time. There aren't those some of the, I guess, necessary restraints that are part of raising a family that are attached to that. So it can be a great time, and people can have great relationships, especially when they define what they want and they pursue that at the pace that they desire.
And I think, too, something you said just made me think that maybe even freeing yourself from this idea that you have to find that one person who's your companion across all these areas of life.
Sure.
And in older adulthood, just isn't of any age, but especially in thinking about as people are discovering new interests, you may have the friend that you go to the cooking class with, the friend that you go take a walk in the neighborhood with, the friends at your church, the friends here, and the romantic partner, and just kind of maybe having a little more time on your hands if you're not working full time, or have a little bit more flexibility in your schedule, gives you that opportunity to really enjoy different types of relationships, different friendships, children, grandchildren, and what those are like, and just that to me feels like a really rich picture of relationships in older adulthood.
Absolutely, and then just using natural connections. For example, everybody goes to the doctor's office. Well, there's a time when you're in that lobby and there are people sitting there, and instead of everyone reading the magazine or looking at their phones, what if you said something to the person next to you and just started a conversation there? It doesn't have to mean it's ending in a relationship, but just that you had a positive social interaction with someone that may have brightened their day and yours as well. Those little things count towards that sense of being connected to the community and not all alone.
That's a really good point, that it doesn't even have to be a really significant relationship to have a sense of connection, but just the more that you're engaging with the world around you in lots of different ways, the more you're really meeting that need.
Absolutely.
So, wow, we're already down to the last 10 minutes to go. So did we have any questions to add?
You mentioned earlier about using technology as a way to make connections. Are there some other strategies to use technology to your advantage?
Sure. There are different options that are already created, and then there are some that you can create. So, for example, certainly there are, Meetup, if people are familiar with that. That's a website where you can go on there and express what your interest or affinity is. It might be bike riding, it might be walking or hiking, and then you put your location, and it shows you where and what time there is a group meeting to do that activity. So that's one way to use technology to connect with just different activities that you're interested in. You've certainly got the websites that you can use that are for connecting and meeting up. And then you can also use that to create your own thing. You can start a book club. You can start a blog. You can start a podcast. So any of those things are ways that you can get creative on there and engage. There are various chat groups that are based on certain topics of interest that people can engage in. So a number of ways to do that. And then connecting with your family. A lot of seniors are taking a class to learn how to use technology to communicate with grandkids, to communicate with adult children. Just being on an email group or a Facebook group can really engage folks. And the number of seniors using Facebook now is definitely increasing. So there are a lot of ways to use that technology to be connected, actively and creatively.
And we've had a program that we've done through the Healthy Relationships Initiative about grandparenting in the digital age. And it is really important for seniors to maybe not let themselves have any fears of technology or discomfort, keep them from the opportunities that they could have, because maybe your grandchild lives a couple states away, but maybe you can start texting them here and there as a way to build that connection, or checking in with them and having more ways to connect with them. So in many ways, technology, even though for some people it's something that they view as a real barrier to healthy relationships, it also, if used in the right ways, can help to facilitate stronger relationships.
Absolutely, and many community centers offer classes on that technology for free to seniors. So there's a way for them to learn that, whether it's on their phone or computer. There's a way for them to learn how to use that and to get engaged.
Yeah. And I know that we are running short on time, but and we kind of went off script a lot, which I think is just great, because it was just great to hear a lot of your thoughts. But are there any other specific points that you want to make sure that we communicate to anybody listening?
Sure. Well, one thing is that what a relationship should look like when you're a senior should mirror, in terms of certain principles, the same things as when you are a young adult or middle age, and that is that there needs to be respect. There needs to be a reasonable amount of trust. I don't say absolute trust, but a reasonable amount of trust in that relationship. There needs to be communication, but back and forth. There needs to be respect for your independence and your choices, and there needs to be mutual benefit. There shouldn't be a relationship where only one person is getting the benefit out of that. So there are some things that are foundational that will make a senior relationship or any other relationship work, and that's important to have those. And then I just encourage seniors, this is a great time in your life. Explore. Be a little adventurous. So whether you're adventuring on the internet or whether you're adventuring in your community, just getting out and walking around is important to meet folks. Even if you are using a wheelchair or a walker, getting out in your community and seeing what's happening around you are very important ways. And then while you're out there, say hello, hi, what's your name? My name is, and start to build that way, because sometimes a network that you form to support you that's nearby and can reach you quickly is not your child living in another state, but the neighbors around you who go, oh, I met her, and she's usually outside about this time, and she's not, so I'm going to go knock on the door and check on her.
And I think one of the things that in many ways older adults can really help teach younger generations, especially in today's day and age when people are so busy, even in a neighborhood, there's not as much connection.
Yes.
But it seems like that's something that really is something that older adults can really teach all of us.
Yes.
Is the importance of those connections and stopping and chatting with your neighbor on the front porch or as you're walking on the street, and just taking that time to get to know people and how important that is. Because in some ways I think we've lost some of the value around that, or maybe people still value it, but lives are just so busy and take people all over the place. And so I really appreciate your focus on just having people to stay positive and stay connected and reach out and, you know, just keep going for those relationships. Even if it's difficult, just know that you may not connect with everybody that you meet, but any connection is potentially an opportunity to brighten someone else's day, or brighten your day, or maybe ideally brighten everybody's day who's involved in those interactions.
Absolutely, and sometimes it's a matter of numbers. Just like if someone's looking for a job, sometimes you have to do so many applications to get an interview, and then so many interviews to get a job. And with connections, it might take several. You might have to speak to the person in the grocery store, speak to the person in your neighborhood, and everyone may not be receptive to it, but this is about your empowerment, that you are making an active choice to make a difference, to engage in your world, and there are going to be rewards eventually.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
Just that relationships are critical. They're important. We've got to have them, and it's important to not give up, but to really step out there. Well,
I have really appreciated learning from you today. You've really got me thinking about how just relationships change over the course of the lifetime, and to some extent there might be losses along the way, and that can be sad and grieving, but it's also new opportunities to think about having better and healthier relationships the older that we get. So I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure.
And we just want to thank you all for listening to today's program as well. We encourage you to fill out the feedback form, and the next Relationship Booster will be in August 9th, and the topic is preparing for college transition for parents sending their children off to college. So thank you so much again, and we hope that you took a lot away from today's program in thinking about healthy relationships and older adulthood.